Christianity in America, what kind of immediate associations do you make after hearing that title? Are there certain things that come to mind, current events, celebrities, statistics, cultural issues? When asked to explore this topic, the state of Christianity in America, most Christians can't help but find themselves drawn to our particular question. Why is our culture becoming so secular? This is generally our way of evaluating and measuring our own influence in the nation. We look outwards at culture, and most of the time we don't like what we see. But before we can answer this question, the why, we have to address its implications. That infamous rising secularization, growing unbelief, the shift. Can we even make such claims? Well, let's look at the facts. The facts do support this notion. There is an objective and observable trend in the United States religious composition, a shift in a secular direction. As made evidenced by the results of a recent study done by the Pew Research Center, religious affiliation is decreasing, prayer is decreasing, church attendance is decreasing, and Christianity is generally regarded as less important than it was 10 years ago. It's difficult for Christians to lament over these changes, specifically focusing on the observable effects this shift has had within American culture. Although American culture has always been rough around the edges, many Christians claim that it's now worse than ever. Suggestive content, explicit content, on your television, in your music, depravities at every turn. Is our culture too far gone? Have Christians lost their influence? Are we becoming irrelevant? Surely the only way to reverse this shift is by tackling this demographic, these non-believers steering the trajectory of culture. What can we do to stop them? How do we get to the bottom of their behavior? How can we figure out why they seem so unwilling to embrace God? Well, the truth is that we've lost sight of what we should be focusing on. Ourselves. As Christians lament over these unfolding uncertainties, shaking our heads and wagging our fingers at the runaway train that is our ever-secularizing culture, we often fail to recognize one of the largest sources of such change, us. If that seems paradoxical, that's because it is. How and why would Christians be a hindrance to themselves and culture? There's no way our impact in America would be pushing the country towards secularization. Unfortunately, to evade this truth would be yet another dismissal in a centuries-long streak of denial. The reason our culture is so disconnected from Christianity stems from two twin issues, our mistakes and our denial of those mistakes. What we face today are the consequences of decades of mishandled history finally catching up to us. Now, as our country takes even greater steps away from faith, it's time that we, Christians, take some accountability. What we first have to understand is an imperative force. Sin permeates all human endeavors. Humans are prone to sin, and our application of the Christian faith is no exception. Although Christianity itself, God's will and His word, are impervious to sin's influence, the human side of religion is not immune. Scripture even warns us about it. Just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. If someone comes to you and preaches a Jesus other than the Jesus we preached, or if you receive a different spirit from the spirit you received, or a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it. 2 Corinthians 11:3-4. The mere nature of faith does not protect our endeavors from our own depravity. Faith can become misrepresented. People exploit it, weaponize it, twist, defile, reshape, and mangle it until it's unrecognizable. Such twisted faith is so far divorced from God's truth that it doesn't represent Him at all. However, despite the fact that such ideologies are a far cry from the teachings of Jesus, they exist, and people are hurt by them every day. And the result of such weaponized Christianity, people fear God who loves them. They develop religious trauma. Religious trauma syndrome can best be defined as when a person experiences deep psychological pain as the result of authoritarianism coupled with toxic theology, often received and reinforced at church, school, and home. Religious trauma syndrome is more than just disliking religion. It's a deep psychological pain, a pain that affects every aspect of a person's life. The trauma caused by religious abuse can result in suppression of normal child development and damage to normal thinking and feeling abilities. RST develops when Christianity is used as an abusive device, be it physical, psychological, verbal, or sexual abuse. People who suffer from RST often walk away from the Christian faith for reasons that, though they may not reflect the truth and goodness of Christianity, are undeniably valid and tragic. The nature of this psychological pain is often difficult for many Christians to fully grasp. Christians who have had a positive relationship with Christianity don't have the same perspective as those who have not been so fortunate. What we must understand is that our good experiences don't resolve other people's bad experiences. Assistant Professor Ryan Burge explains, many people have been abused at the hands of people who claim to act in the name of Jesus Christ. These stories, and many more, are completely legitimate reasons to walk away from any institution, regardless of whether it embodies the truth or not. Your story is not their story. To belittle, minimize, or try to explain away the stories of those who walked away or never connected to a church home is to fail to understand that not everyone comes to faith the same way we did. These stories are what define our perception. They shape how we interpret and approach concepts like organized religion. Those of us strong in our faith must be mindful of those with stories unlike our own. Mindfulness, awareness, and empathy are crucial in our first steps towards healing the scars of religious trauma and alleviating its impacts. Pair individual instances of mistreatment with a history of concealed and ignored mistakes, and the effects of weaponized faith become even greater and more destructive. Understanding the nuances of Christianity's history is crucial. Christians have done a lot of good down and throughout history, founding charities, advocating for the oppressed, demonstrating compassion, all efforts that embody Christ-likeness. It's important to praise these individuals, to lift up these good instances in our history and aspire towards them. However, a problem arises when we begin to use these acts of goodness as a shield to hide behind, a means of insurance, a way to turn away from our darker moments in history. Because the truth is, the church has been on both sides of history. For every righteous, good-natured Christian in history, there have been just as many corrupt Christians pushing against them. The church has struggled with internal racism and prejudice. Similarly, homophobia has also been a frequent source of hatred among Christians. For centuries, people have acted immorally in the name of Christ. These sort of deep scars are hard to resolve. We may try to forget our own history, tell ourselves that we've atoned because our good efforts outweigh the bad, but the pain experienced by those affected cannot be so easily forgotten. And now that we've blinded ourselves to it, tuned out the echoes of decades of unreconciled sin, that corruption and hatred have been able to persist even into the present. Aside from matters of pain in history, there are other factors turning people away from faith. One of the primary of such forces is Christianity's relationship with political biases, typically, though not always, right-wing politics and conservatism. Such stereotypes are ones that many Christians have been uncompelled to shake off. Thus, religion and politics become indistinguishable, and a politically charged disconnect surges throughout the country, dividing us right along our party lines. The church, a place meant to be an open-minded, open-armed haven for all people, has allowed itself to be influenced by worldly forces, often alienating people from faith. The truth is, we like when our faith and our politics can be easily conjoined into one community that never challenges us. It's a matter of convenience, grouping all the facets of your life into one harmonious bundle. Your faith is merely at the mercy of what you truly value most, your opinion. Whew. But none of this applies to me, we often say, reflexively reassuring ourselves in the face of some unpleasant truths. What should be a call to action often becomes a shunned inconvenience instead. When truth challenges comfort, our own closed-mindedness and stubbornness have a tendency to dominate all else. And our inability to Moreover, our inability to accept those who don't fall into our preconceived norms and preferences leaves many potential Christians feeling shut out and unembraced. Similarly, one of our greatest enemies is our own passivity, our tendency to only exhibit Christ-likeness in situations that come to us, simply waiting to encounter a scenario, failing to pursue the lost. This is the privilege of the undoubting, the luxury that comes to those who are secure in their faith. We trust in God to do all our work for us, assuming He will allow us to spread our word in a manner that doesn't require us to deviate from our own path of personal priorities. Everything must satisfy our all-consuming need for convenience at all costs. Often, the cost of such comfort is the salvation of others. Salvation not just from unbelief, but from suffering. And so, in the wake of our mistakes, a reactionary movement has risen, the evangelicals. The term evangelical is a catch-all term for people who walked away, disillusioned and sometimes even traumatized by American evangelical Christianity. People, legitimate in their pain, misguided in their perception of God's will, have come together to share their stories and listen. Social media has provided them an outlet to connect with each other. Algorithms expedite the process. Evangelicalism is, essentially, deconstruction on a national scale. The poetic irony of this situation, the evangelicals are doing our job for us. They support one another. They built up a church when they couldn't find one. This community is not that of the prodigal son off in the far country, so much of that of his father, waiting by the road for a prodigal they loved and wanted to embrace again, their church. As is its nature, the lost sheep searches, standing in a dark, empty field apart from the other 99, crying out, waiting. What happens when no one comes? So many righteous Christians have worked incredibly hard to fulfill God's will, and yet we still have a deep-seated image problem and a persistent underlying negative influence. What do we do now? What should Christianity in America truly look like? Well, the first step in amending our image and righting our wrongs is self-awareness and self-reflection. As explained in 1 John 1:8, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. We must be able to recognize our shortcomings and make proactive changes. By both addressing and resolving the cause and prevalence of forces like deconstruction and religious trauma, Christians can not only further illuminate the truth of the gospel, but also alleviate the pain of many non-believers, hopefully inspiring them to reevaluate and re-enter the Christian faith. The second step, the way to help those who are hurting today, weep with those who weep, Romans 12:15. As unnerving as our image problem may be, that is not the real tragedy of the situation. It isn't about us. It's about those still outside. Russell Moore, notable American theologian and preacher, puts it simply. Jesus does not need us to do public relations for his 99 sheep still in the pasture. He needs us to go looking for the one who's lost in the woods. At some time or another, that's all of us. And we will count on a church loving us enough to send in someone after us. Not with hectoring and shaming, but with patience and love. Let's have love for the ex-evangelical. That's the solution. Love for the ex-evangelical. We cannot continue to mistake hurt for rebellion, trauma for infidelity, or a broken heart for an empty soul. We must have love. We must weep for them. We must reach out to them with warmth and mercy and patience. We must have open arms and open hearts. To fulfill what America so desperately needs, we must do what we are called to do. We must be the church. And I finished that presentation in like 6 minutes. I would take way longer than that. There we go. Please ask me lots of engaging questions. I have a lot to talk about, and I care about this a lot. So ask anything. Who would like to go first?
Teachers first.
Go for it. Yes, teachers first.
Teacher.
I'm trying to.
I'll go. I think I hear you use Christianity and religion simultaneously. Can you explain what you mean?
Interchangeably?
Yes, thank you.
Well, I think that since this is like a Christian school, I'm kind of focusing on Christianity because that's the group I'm in, and that's the place where I feel like I have a right to talk. But, you know, stuff like religious trauma, it affects like people of all religions, you know? I don't know if I have any examples off the top of my head right now, but you can research it. It applies to like other religions because you see, you know, given that the pervasiveness of sin, given that it's our nature to kind of take pretty much anything and make it depraved and like use it for like to fill our own, you know, desires or whatever. You see other religions kind of suffering the same situation, even if in their doctrines, like they preach, you know, a similar goodness and like truth and stuff like that to Christianity. You'll still see practitioners of those faith, you know, twist it for their own exploits and abuse people with it. So I think that a lot of this topic can apply to other cultures and other religions, but since this is like Southside Christian and like I'm a Christian, I just kind of mainly focus on Christianity, but, you know, there are nuances of, you know, the Bible Belt and Christian fundamentalism, authoritarianism, and all of that that are separate and distinct from other religions. But, you know, I didn't get that in depth with this since I didn't have a ton of time. But it's really an interesting thing to research, I think.
Thank you.
You can go if you want. So
Okay,
Should I be scared?
no, it's just like a quote. I can't find it.
here's something that I'm curious of. Maybe this is perception. I don't know if you came across. I've yet to find anybody like Ryan Burge, by the way, the name that you see up here. If this is he's top notch on. He's a political scientist. Like he knows numbers and statistics, and even if he's worth a follow on Twitter. Those of you that are into such a thing. Anyways, he throws out all these wonderful statistics and so on. So like excellent source there. But even he I've not seen him really get this far into answering this question, and that is how much of this is walking away from organized Christianity specifically. How much of it is intellectual versus experiential, for lack of better terms? Meaning, how much of this are folks looking at, this is what Christians believe, and I don't believe that, therefore I'm leaving, versus I don't like the way that they're behaving, therefore I'm leaving?
Well, I think, so you're asking about people who walk away from the faith?
Right. So the ex-evangelical,
that would tie into, you know, there's sort of, the ex-evangelical movement, not everyone in it is a sufferer of religious trauma syndrome. It might be like an intellectual thing or like kind of just like a like you're an observer or something,
Mhm.
and you're a witnesser of like all this stuff happening.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I gotta say this. Unfortunately, the Capitol riot, there were a lot of self-proclaimed Christians there.
Absolutely.
You saw them carry around the cross there. You know, you have people who maybe haven't even really had an overtly negative experience with Christianity in their lives, but when they see that, like in the news, that, you know, puts a bad taste in their mouths. And especially when you see a lot of Christians not really, I don't know, not to like make a generalization, but not really engaging with that. And like, there's no like redeeming points that are like evident in our culture. This is a big generalization, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But in terms of like religious trauma, like I don't think that it's just complicated, because when you're like are experiencing like abuse, it just affects like how you perceive everything.
Mhm.
And you're not going to be, you know, getting like physically or mentally or verbally or sexually abused by someone that claims to be acting in the name of Christ. You're not going to go through all that and then sit down with your Bible and be like, well, right here in whatever chapter it says that is wrong. You know, you're not going to like have that sort of clarity and that sort of like, you know, like sit down calm. You're just going to have like that pain, and that pain is going to bleed into your perception. It's just going to cause you like mental agony to try to even like think about this stuff. And I think that's like the whole nuance of the situation that Christians have been so unwilling to like engage with, because we're just like, oh, obviously that doesn't represent us, so I don't have to engage with that, or I don't have to, you know, that doesn't concern me, you know, like if you suffered at someone that claimed to be a Christian, well, they're not really a Christian, so that has nothing to do with me, you know, but it's like, you're missing the point. The point is that like, you know, we should be like really concerned about this. We should be really engaged with this and like worried for people and like heartbroken for them. But instead, all we can do is be bitter and like focused on ourselves, you know, make it about us. So I think that's the big aspect of it, is like understanding all the nuances and like, you know, you've got your cultural reasons people walk away, intellectual reasons, you know, personal reasons, all this stuff tied together in a big massive mess that Christians have just not been, I mean, maybe some have, but a lot of us are so uncompelled to even talk about it, you know? Like this past week, I've been like, if I mention religious trauma, I'm worried people are gonna think I'm crazy, because people just don't talk about it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. In terms of how big of an issue it is, absolutely. It's one of those things that far too many people are guilty of it. Therefore, far too few people are willing to talk about it. Just for my 2 cents, but this isn't my presentation. Did you find your quote yet?
Yep.
Okay.
I actually have
Is this a question or just a?
I have several questions.
Okay.
There's the secularization thesis of Charles Taylor, Jamie Smith, that video we watched last year in my class. Like, that aside, is the claim that the two factors, like the determining factors in the secularization of our culture, are our mistakes?
No.
Not our mistakes, or are they factors of?
Look, where's my factors of? Hold on, let me get to that slide. That's kind of
Or
just
factors,
me.
yeah, that lead
That's
to.
kind of just me being like in my presentation mode and wanting to say something quickly and short and to the point. I mean, here's the thing. Hold on. I have to change the slide on both like screens. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, all this, you know, obviously there's multiple parties at play here. Not every person in culture is like a sufferer of religious trauma or all that. It's kind of like a two-way street, you know? Like non-believers do their thing, Christians do their thing. But my whole like crux of this project is that I want to talk about the side that we never really want to talk about. Because there's no point in me talking about this, because this is, I mean, a lot of this we talk about in this class, you know, and just at Southside all the time. Not that it's a bad thing, that's important, and like that's kind of, you know, I mean, I don't want to be crucified up here.
No, I think to your point is, it's easy for us to say, look how bad they are.
It is.
And your presentation is trying to say, yeah, but how bad are we?
We got to talk about what's uncomfortable and address, like, you know, the fact that a lot of this stuff, like the Lil Nas X demon shoes or whatever, that is 100% like a Christian issue in the sense that that is the result of like, I know it's silly, but that's the result of like a religious trauma type thing. You know, Lil Nas X is like he's gay, and he's had bad experiences with Christianity in the past, to the point where he now semi-ironically embraces like demon and devil, pornography or whatever, as sort of way of like fighting back and like claiming it and making it his own and all that stuff. Like that's not just him trying to like, be like ooh, look how spooky this is. Like there is actual like pain and something really personal and sad buried under all that. And I might try to like laugh it off and be like, it's just silly, or or like that's sus, or something stupid like that. But like that's something real there, and that's like a real person and a real pain, So
It's also the result, I would say, of worldview thinking, but maybe that's.
Don't say that word.
Maybe that's.
Don't say the word worldview.
So my next question was.
Yes.
Premise one, I think I actually got it backwards. No, okay. So that factors, it's time for judgment to begin with the house of God. Like that's, the Bible says that. Like
Yes.
It's time for judgment to begin with the house of God. Judgment begins here, not there. So 100%. But does premise one that our mistakes lead to the secularization of culture, it all going to hell in a handbasket? Is premise one delegitimized by the good that Christianity has done in the past? And if not, why not?
Well, that kind of goes into my history slide or whatever. So you're saying, what are you saying?
So,
put it simply, I get what you're saying, but I want to answer the right question.
That if our mistakes, and I'm not necessarily worried about the denial of our mistakes, I would understand that. If our mistakes are what have led to the secularization of culture, it feels like the good that Christianity has done
It's like not working, or
that would somehow lead one to say that then the good that Christianity has done should have led to the increasing religiosity of culture. And maybe to some extent it did.
It did, but here's the thing. This is like a fact I didn't even get to put on here because I didn't have time. With that whole notion of shifting, and Christianity was once in power and was once the default standard. When you look at statistics and personal testimonies and all this stuff, a lot of the reason this plummet has been so great is not because of increased unbelief, but because of increased profession for unbelief. A lot of proclaimed Christians in the past weren't really Christians. They were just doing so because it was a cultural standard. And, a lot of our influence back then, I don't know, you could get real historic and talk about the founding of America and all this stuff and crazy stuff like that. So I think that's one aspect of this is sure, things are changing, but also part of the reason they're changing is that they're just showing kind of a lot of what we already had to begin with. And in terms of I'm trying to think of how to answer why our good works haven't been enough. And
I guess what I'm after is because the idea that okay, nominal Christianity has faded and everything else, and that maybe we're not as quote unquote secular as that's all part of that Charles Taylor secularization, whatever. When we say secular, we don't actually mean what we think we mean, and so on and so forth. But it feels and I suspect that I know the answer, but it feels like there's something.
You should tell me.
There's something ontologically different about Christianity and its influence in culture as opposed to some other institutions.
You should have asked that first. I think that, I don't know, it's all just about tackling this in different ways. What when you look at when you isolate our good acts, what exactly have they been? And have they been what I've been talking about towards the end of my thing? Have they been that, or have they just been building a hospital or something, or being really nice? Or a lot of it I think has to do with our reflection of ourselves and a lot of evaluation within our own community and the interaction of all these forces. I don't know, it's very complicated.
But my real question is why is Christianity held to a different standard than other institutions which have all done good and bad? And to some extent, sure, cancel culture, whatever.
Held to a different standard by whom? Because if you're asking why me, it's because I'm in this building. Or are you talking, who is holding Christianity? You
Well, I think the evidence is in that you have a group of people called ex-evangelicals.
Why
you don't have folks that are referred to as ex-Muslims or ex Or like you said, to any other
I think that
institution.
would kind of tie into that whole history thing and like how ingrained Christianity has been with like American culture and like the founding of America. In God we trust. That's the whole shebang. You know what I mean?
Okay.
They're just so ingrained, and like you have like I could go on a rant about like white colonialism and all this stuff. And it's just like, the first people who came to America were fleeing religious persecution, like
So
the first white people, you get what I mean? When we colonized this land, we did so for religious reasons, and all throughout history you've seen, in American culture, it's just been very ingrained with Christianity, and I think that's why there's such like a reactionary thing. It's because I guess Christianity had the most influence in this country, and it's the one that's touched the most people. And I think it hasn't had, I don't want to say a lot of criticism, but like, I don't know how to describe it. But it's like, you just see that throughout the evangelical movement, like people are getting sick of just like taking it because it's like common or like traditional or like, good and stuff like that. And you're seeing more people like talking and like coming together, forming that surrogate church or whatever. Because I think a lot of people who have had bad experiences with Christianity, like the Bible Belt or something like that, they just kind of grow up and they just kind of repress that. And they haven't really talked to each other about it, I would say, because you don't really want to revisit trauma. I think with the internet and with a lot of like social changes, like people are getting talking, especially after things like the Capitol riot and stuff like that. Like people are just getting fed up. So I don't know. I think that's kind of why it's different. And maybe in other countries, you're going to see an evangelical-esque movement in regards to another religion, but I didn't research that, so.
So
give me another one.
That's good. The last thing I just wanted, the quote I was looking for.
That's the warning
Yeah,
bell.
15.
Okay. Is the idea that the evangelical movement is deconstruction on a national scale?
Yes, I had to, that makes a little bit less sense because I cut out like 50% of my project to do this.
I think that the way that you saying that is how most people understand that movement.
Yeah.
And the idea borrows from Jacques Derrida and deconstruction and everything else. And so the interesting thing about Derrida, and this is what he said, or this is a scholar of Derrida, to deconstruct is not to destroy but to ply something loose.
Mm-hmm.
To loosen its strings so as to give it a future, to let it reinvent itself, to allow for the incoming of the other.
You and your otherness.
Aside from his writings, he spent his whole life trying to come up with alternative open-ended institutions with programs for the unprogrammable. Deconstruction is affirmation. The idea that, like, we use deconstruction to just mean like, oh, those bitter religious
Wiping
trauma
a clean
people.
slate, like, ripping everything down rather than like building up a new.
Well, that like I just love that image of like to pry something loose. That if I'm willing to peel and to question and to deal with this, that maybe something new comes out. Maybe something new and better.
Like liberating, or?
Yes. Like,
Well, and to that point, like the thing that I love about Derrida's work, with like the deconstructive process, which he just absolutely refused to. What's up?
We need Gracie for an AP bio exam.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it. No, that's fine.
Sorry, very
So like the actual process of deconstructing, according to Derrida, it's a double move. It's pulling what you can affirm and rejecting what you disregard. And on that definition, it's like, I mean, that's kind of reformation. That's kind of right.
Surrogate church, you're like, that's kind of what you've been witnessing with this whole community, is people coming together. They're not just trying to like lambast Christianity and like tear everything apart and like, cross the ruckus. It's like they're trying to like form something real amongst themselves, and that on both ends shows something really cool, which it kind of shows what I wrote about in my theology and apologetics final paper or whatever, that sort of innate yearning you have. And that could essentially be an argument in favor of Christianity, is that you see these people, even in the act of deconstructing from Christianity, what they're making is Christianity, and that's wild, and that's crazy to me, and I think I don't know, I could talk about this all day. It's just fascinating.
So let me give you one more direction to talk about. So putting a personal face on it, because we've been dealing in the abstract and it's been real theoretical, and it's easy. Generalizations are fun and easy, but as you, and I think the reason why we apologize for them so much is because they're also not very personal, by nature of it. But so putting a personal face on it, there are lots of folks in my life, having grown up in church, having grown up in Christian schools, I don't know that they would necessarily use the term evangelical, but they certainly qualify as having grown up, professed belief, and now they want nothing to do with it. In fact, I think I shared with you in here before that moving to Greenville a couple of years ago, I found that one of my former students is living in the area, and we were real close when I had him as a student. Like we were really close, and so I messaged him and said, "Hey, moving to the area, like can't wait." And he's all excited, wants to show me all sorts of, where all the best coffee is and all that stuff. And cool, can't wait. And then about, at some point in time in the messaging back and forth, oh, by the way, you should know, I don't consider myself a Christian anymore. And that was important because I was his Bible teacher, for crying out. Like I knew him by way of our Christian school. Like anyways, so there's a whole history there. And it's like, one day I went to message him to say, let's sit down. I'd love to hear your story. And honestly, truly, I had already made the determination, I'm going to sit, I'm going to listen. I'm not going to give him all the reasons why he shouldn't have made that move. I want to figure out how this guy, honestly, this kid y'all would have criticized him for being a goody two-shoes. Like he was up in front in chapel. He was singing and playing the guitar. He preached a couple of times for our chapel. Like he was that kid, and now he doesn't get all that to say this. As I went to message him, hey, I just want to sit and listen. We were messaging one another through Instagram, and he had just shared a meme, one of these like evangelical type memes, where it's like, basically the butt of the joke was when your Christian friends invite you out to coffee. So here's my question. Yeah. It's like that kind of stopped me dead in my tracks because guess what I was about to invite him to.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
So my question is this: on a personal level, I got somebody who, I got people in my life who grew up Christian. They walked away from the faith. I have found, and if you want to talk about deconstruction, it's something that I've personally gone through. All I want is to show them what I found so profoundly helpful to me. I would like it to help them as well. But how?
Yeah, this is why we need to talk about this more, is because when you're an ex-evangelical living in the Bible Belt South, and you might still interact with an institution like, let's say, Southside Christian or something.
Just to put it
in. I don't know. But you have so many Christians that when they see someone going through this, they approach the subject all wrong. And they make it incredibly hard for anyone to do it right. Because, that coffee meme, how many people do you think that he's known have approached him and taken him out for coffee and just been absolute jerks, Or treated him like he's not all there or something like that, like he's fragile, like he's gonna break if you talk to him wrong. How much can people deal with those sort of reactions, those sort of interactions before they're just done, I've got a friend, I don't want to get too specific, but I've got a friend who went here for a while, and she's going through a similar thing like that, and it puts me in kind of a weird position because I find myself terrified. I don't want to be the nagging Christian friend. And I don't want it to ruin this friendship we have. It's like, how do you go about this, in a way that's right, in a way that doesn't, I don't know. I don't want to get too personal. But.
Yeah. So it's a question that has yet to have a sufficient answer.
It's very complicated. And I think that ties into our whole thing about paying attention to our mistakes and, having some self-awareness. And why am I so emotional today? It's just
no, it's because it's a...
No, I just gotta drink water.
No,
I want to finish this sentence.
Because the move that I made was from the general to the personal. And that's my thing is one of the things...
I kept this so general.
One of the things that I'm personally dissatisfied with is that I've seen so many people write really intelligent arguments and explanations of this big, broad movement. Meanwhile,
It's so personal.
You got people, right?
It's so personal.
So that's why I wanted to drive it there, because I constantly have this theological liberal and theological fundamentalist inside of me all day fighting, right? And they're always wanting to affirm as many people as possible, or condemn as many people as possible, to help as many people as possible, to correct as many people as possible. And then I got to see faces in front of me that they're not privy to that conversation.
And I think that's like the whole, it ties in once again, like that's the thing we do. That's our need for comfort, and we don't want to, this is really challenging because it's really personal to like us even, you know? Because we're all kind of guilty of it, you know? We see someone lose a faith and we might roll our eyes, you know? We're all guilty. And what we try to do is we try to keep it general, you know? You'll hear it on like podcasts and articles and Twitter and stuff like that. The exponential, the secularization, all this stuff. And we try to keep it as disconnected and unpersonal as we can, make it a big think piece generalization sort of thing, because we're absolutely terrified of looking at somebody and seeing their face, you know?
Oh yeah, but I talk about the other too much.
No, yeah. what? That's some quote, but I can't remember that right now. But that's like the whole thing, is that being personal is the most important and the most challenging. So,
Cool.
I don't know.
I have one more question.
Yeah,
Sure,
go for it.
So why do you think this is coming up now? Like, horrible atrocities have been done in the name of God and Christianity throughout history. So why now?
It's fascinating. I don't know. People like to say that we're in the 60s again. I don't quite know if that's true. But I mean, you see, I think the internet is just kind of another imperative thing that, like, things are, like, building up and building up and building up. And the more connected we get, the more specific and sharp our arguments get and our emotions in these communities. And, like, things are both not getting big and getting big. We have a tendency to, like, blow things out of proportion, say it's the 60s again, all this stuff, when things have really been persisting throughout time, you know, the whole time. However, attention is attention, and things are getting more attention, you know? This evangelical thing, I would say it's getting bigger, you know? Even if it's always been there, I would say it's getting bigger. And I don't know, maybe you could say that we're entering Revelations or something. I don't know. I don't quite know why everything is happening now, but it is. I guess you could just say it's just kind of the progression of the internet, that this is where we were inevitably going to wind up all along unless we freaking do something. So, I don't know, just kind of an inevitable thing. But it is fascinating watching the way these things change, things that have been happening for so long. Yet I feel like now, like, there's really this connectedness among people who experience this sort of stuff. And it's like, if we don't do something, we're in trouble, you know? So, any questions from you guys? You guys are allowed to talk.
No, they're not. Yeah, you are.
Like,
Go for it.
about praise. Anything.
What got you so interested in this? Like, what was like the setting off?
I would say like the personal connections, the fact that this is senior year. I wanted to get people talking, I guess, and say stuff that if I got expelled now, then whatever. At least I have to leave now, rather than a couple years ago. I have a captive audience. This is a big project. You know, people are talking about it. I've got teachers here that are held hostage. It's just a big deal, and this is like, you know, the biggest project you'll do your senior year. It's a senior seminar. It's this big thing. And I'm like, not that there's anything wrong with talking about whatever, you know, but I didn't want to come up here and just talk about, like, something, just something random. I don't know. I wanted to do something that I thought about my whole time here, you know, like something very important that I've seen people talk about it here and there, but I don't know if we as a grade or we as a school have really addressed this in a direct way, and in a way that might make us uncomfortable. Because that's why I'm up here. I want to make us uncomfortable, I guess. And just, getting down to, like, because anytime people talk about this, we always try to deflect it. we always try to be like, wow, the people who do terrible things, they're not real Christians. And I'm self-aware of that fact. I know that Christians can be bad, and thus I am absolved, and I've done everything there is to do, and I'm just going to go about my life now and never really do anything. And I feel like a lot of people, we wind up in that weird middle ground where we have a little bit of a vague awareness and we think that's enough, you know? We think a little bit of sympathy is enough. But what we really have to do, especially now that we're all about to graduate and we're about to go off to all these colleges, we need to be good in standards. And we need to be like, you know, aware and like cognizant and all conscientious and all this stuff. Like we can't just go to Clemson or USC or wherever and just be, you know, just some random Christian from private Christian school who knows nothing and is so out of touch with everything that's going on, you know? Like, we're gonna encounter people that are just like what I've been talking about, and what we gotta do is start being like really good examples and like start changing things, you know? Showing people like, okay, maybe you're not entirely what I expected, and like that's where we're gonna have the potential for real conversations and real change and real healing and something like genuine that isn't just like, you know, talking past each other. So that's kind of why I just thought this was really important, and I thought this was a good situation to talk about this, and I'm really proud of how it went. So
Great, yeah.
thank you.
Very good job.
Completely drained.
Thanks, Addison.
Woo, thank you guys for your time.
Do you favorite